So again, going back to my diagram, traditionally at the bottom, this is where our players have come from, this Protestant grammar school route. We're now working in these areas with our programs as well. Okay? We feel that our traditional grammar schools are strong and will continue to be strong, and we'll support them in a different way. But we're also then working with other schools to introduce the game and to get people involved in what we're doing. Again, in terms of the reality of rugby within Ulster in 2013, we actively promote opportunities to play the game for underrepresented groups. Again, whether this is young people, whether it's females, both at adult and youth level, or people with a disability, or older people, or people who are in areas of deprivation where there aren't necessarily the facilities or opportunity to play the game. We actively go into these areas and we promote rugby as an alternative. And we find that as a result of that, we actually get people interested, because simply the reason they haven't played rugby before is they haven't had the opportunity. Growing up, I never had the opportunity to play Gaelic football because of the school that I went to and the area that I grew up in. I have no idea whether I could have been a great Gaelic footballer. Probably looking at the size and shape of me, probably not, but that's for another day. Women's rugby is one of the fastest growing areas of the game at both youth and adult level, simply because we've gone out there and provided the opportunity for girls and young women to play the game. And they've taken to it because they've seen it on TV, they've seen brothers and fathers playing the game, but the pathway has never been there before. The picture that we have on the screen is from our Girls' Schools Cup, which last year we had over 50 schools competing from across the province in. And to help with the development of that, we host regional blitzes throughout the province, but we work it so that we end up with 2 schools who come to Ravenhill, the home of Ulster Rugby, and they get the opportunity to play at Ravenhill, which they see on television every Friday and Saturday night where the Ulster professional team play. And we think that that's a very important aspect for us, that we create the link between what happens on the ground with clubs and schools, but also what happens with our professional team. And that acts again as a great draw for people wanting to get involved. And again, that demonstrates our wish to be equal and to treat people equally and provide them with the opportunity. Over the last 4 or 5 years, we've also developed disability rugby, and again, it was great to hear previous speakers talking about that as well. In particular, where we're working with young people and adults with learning difficulties to get involved in the game, and to also establish sections within existing rugby clubs where these kids can come along and feel part of the club. And certainly the clubs that have got that up and running so far have reported a real feel-good factor about their clubs, because again, it's widening what we term the rugby family and more people becoming involved. And again, this is something which is growing. We have 5 clubs currently. We have another 2 clubs who are currently going through the process of getting established. And we have 4 clubs established within the Leinster branch around Dublin. And now our kids are getting the opportunity to play against each other from an Ulster and Leinster point of view, and hopefully that will spread throughout the rest of the province as well. One of the key things for us has been to develop strategic partnerships with other organisations, and to think a little bit outside the box as to what we're actually about, and to actually think of ourselves as more than just a rugby province or rugby union or rugby development, but thinking about what else is it that we actually do. How else could you describe us as an organisation? You may see yourselves in opposition to other sports. Previously you talked about soccer and cycling being the religion within this area. Within Ireland, soccer and Gaelic football are definitely religions, and probably from a rugby point of view, we would come in third in terms of participation rates behind those 2 sports. But rather than look at them as competitors, we have actually approached them and worked with them to look at a way of allowing us to develop the game. Because particularly in areas where Gaelic football or soccer might be strong, whenever people see us coming along and working with those development officers in those sports, they see that actually there's nothing to be frightened about, that the door's being opened up to us. And particularly where we've worked very successfully with the other governing bodies is through a programme called the Game of 3 Halves. Now, those of you who are mathematicians know that you can't have 3 halves, but being Irish, we tend to do things differently. So our Game of 3 Halves are based in what's called interface areas. So interface areas are areas where generally Protestant and Catholic kids come together, and there has traditionally been a lot of problems where there would be rioting and violence between each group. So what we do is we go into these interface areas and we provide the kids from both sides of the interface with the opportunity to play each of the 3 sports. And they rotate around and they play 20 minutes, half an hour of each sport. And what we crucially do is that we mix the kids up so that people from one side just don't stay with their own religious divide, but they mix. And by the end of that hour, hour and a half, you generally find that the kids have found the opportunity to find out the similarities between themselves as opposed to where they focused on the differences between themselves. And more often than not, that simple act of people playing sport and playing different sports acts as a great leveller. And what we found, we've had great success in that, and it's something whenever we add in other organisations around conflict resolution and about promoting understanding, that we get a real return on. And this is a programme which has been ongoing for the last couple of years, and we're getting more and more requests to deliver it throughout the province. So it's been great, and again that's an example of where we've worked with the other government bodies to look at ways of breaking down barriers. We've also gone out of our way to identify specialist organisations who can help provide us in key areas. So for example, most people who are involved in rugby are volunteers, and they give freely of their time and are quite happy to give freely of their time. Within Northern Ireland we have an organisation called Volunteer Now, which is responsible for developing volunteering across all spectrums, whether it's in sport or community or charity work. They have been doing this for years, and they have developed a number of resources which we can then tap into and use from a rugby or from a sport point of view. It means that we as development staff don't have to sit down and write brand new programmes, but we can lift programmes which have already been developed, lift research that's already been developed, and then tailor it to suit our needs. And that has been a great success in helping us to develop and work with our volunteers to make them better at what they do. We've also worked with organisations such as Disability Sport. Again, when people had approached us about wanting to set up rugby for people with disability, we didn't know how to do that, but we went to organisations that did know how to do it, and they guided us through that process. So the challenge is to think about, when is rugby not rugby? What else is it that we do? And then look to see, are there other organisations who work within that field and have got more expertise than us? And it's this idea of thinking beyond just being a sport, which is key to help with development and further development of the game. Another key thing for us, and another key realisation that's come in over the last sort of 18 months to 2 years, is closer involvement with government, both at a national level and at a local level. Interestingly, the Northern Ireland government is starting to realise the impact and the power of sport, and how sport can actually break down barriers which other elements of politics can't. So we're now working with government, and they're now telling us that they'll no longer fund sport for the sake of funding sport, but they want to fund sport to use it as a vehicle to address social issues, such as improving mental health and well-being, developing social inclusion, promoting understanding between communities. As a result of this change of awareness of ourselves and working more closely with government, over the course of the last 6 months, we have successfully secured funding of £1.75 million of investment for the next 2 years. That money will go into programmes and will go into staff to deliver these programmes. The key thing for that is that funding which we already received from the IRFU, from the central body, and has been used to employ people like coach development officers and staff to work with rugby clubs, that we can allow those staff to continue to do that and do the things that they're good at, but bring in other staff who can address and work in some of these specialist areas. And that's been a key thing for us. The photograph that we have up there, you might be able to make out, but it's Ruan Pinar and Tommy Bowe, probably two of our most high-profile players within Ulster. They're pictured here at the launch of a programme with the Department of Social Development, and the guy in the suit is a minister in the Northern Ireland government. And for us, maybe going back 2-3 years ago, it would have been unheard of for us to get a minister along to some of our activity. Now, they're quite happy to come along and to get involved with us because we have engaged directly with government. And just building on this theme of engaging with government and working with politicians, we have used that as an opportunity to tell our story and to actually tell politicians what the reality is. Because again, they have believed what the perception is of rugby in Ulster, in that we don't need any assistance and that we're really only dealing with a minority of people. So we've taken the opportunity to meet with them, to tell them our stories and to challenge their perceptions about us, but also used it as an opportunity to identify what their needs and concerns are so that we can start to address our policy. The two photographs are very significant. The large photograph on this side, on my left, your right, no, your left, sorry, is outside Parliament buildings in Belfast, Stormont, and it's the home of the Northern Ireland Assembly. The picture is of a group called the All-Party Working Group for Rugby, and it is made up of political representatives from every political party in Northern Ireland. They come together every 6 months, every 6 weeks, sorry, with key members of our staff, and we update them on work that's ongoing in our areas. We identify issues and challenges that we have, and we ask for their support and guidance as to how we can address those. This all-party working group is the first of its kind in sport in Northern Ireland, and I know from the point of view that both the IFA, which is the Football Association, and the GAA would both like to set up something similar, but because people's perceptions about them of not being representative of the whole community, that they find that difficult to do so. So we continue to have that competitive edge. The final photograph, the smaller photograph, is very significant and shows you just how far we've come in the last couple of years. The guy in the middle is David Humphreys, who is our current director of rugby at Ulster Rugby and looks after the professional team, and was also our captain when we won the Heineken Cup back in '99. Way back. But yeah, last century. But significantly, the two people that he's talking to are two very high-profile politicians who both come from the main Catholic parties. One of the gentlemen is Conal McDevitt of the SDLP, and the other gentleman is Barry McElduff of Sinn Féin. And from our point of view, if somebody had have said 15, 20 years ago that a member from Ulster Rugby would be talking to a Sinn Féin MLA or an SDLP MLA, they would have thought that you were mad. So again, we've had to challenge ourselves and to challenge perceptions that people have had of us. But that has greatly assisted us with the development of the game. Okay, just coming towards the end of my presentation now. I suppose I've painted a very rosy picture, but there's still a lot of challenges and a lot of work that we have ahead of us, and we're by no means at the end of our journey. Because of the growth that we've had, a number of our rugby clubs are now at a stage where their facilities can't cope with any more numbers. Yet we still have interest and we still have people wanting to play the game. And our concern is that if we continue to grow the game without developing our facilities or looking at other ways of doing it, we're going to lose that interest. And very often, particularly with young people, you only get one opportunity to make a good impression. So we need to think about that in terms of how we develop our facilities to accept the challenge. I've painted, or I've mentioned the success that we've had as a governing body to secure a significant amount of funding over the last number of months. Unfortunately, our rugby clubs haven't been so successful, and when it comes to accessing government funding for even small-scale development, we tend to come very far down the list. There are a number of reasons behind that, mostly because our clubs don't think strategically and don't think about where they need to be in 3, 5 or 10 years' time. And once we start to get our clubs to think about that, once they start to think about that, then they'll suddenly find that the funding will start to come their way. But when things are done very last minute, very ad hoc, against other sports, other clubs who've taken a longer term view, we're always going to score less favourably. We also have to encourage our members, our committee members, our key volunteers to think of rugby more than just a sport. And that's both at a provincial and a club level. to get them to realise that this idea of using sport as a means of social change is a key one and will continue to be a key policy decision by government over the next 5, 10, 15 years. If we don't change our thinking about how we organise our sport, then again we will get left behind, because other sports are already ahead of doing that, already ahead of us in doing that. Our clubs still need to become more integrated into our community. They need to look at how they provide and open up their facilities to their community, because more often than not there is a clubhouse or there are pitches which sit vacant Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, and that could create something or provide an opportunity for people to use that and to actually bring the club into the heart of their local community. There are a number of ongoing issues which keep surfacing year after year after year, and it's important that we start to come up with new solutions to these old problems, or else they'll just keep coming back, and that is one of the challenges that we have going forward. And whether we like it or not, at national or at provincial level, the success and the growth of our game is very much linked to the success of the Irish national team or the Ulster professional team. In the last season and a half, Ulster have featured in a Heineken Cup final, losing to Leinster unfortunately. We have risen to the top of the Rabo League. This year we've sold out 8 of our 10 home games, which is unheard of. We've never done that before. We're about to move into a new stadium which will raise our capacity from 11,000 to 18,000 people. And these things are all very positive. And as a result of those positive things, interest in rugby within Ulster has never been higher. But if the success at national or provincial level decreases, then that interest will go. And the challenge for us is how we tap into that now while the interest is there. The last thing that I want to leave you with is just a quote from Einstein, and I think that it's very apt in terms of maybe addressing some of the challenges for you going ahead. And it's simply, we can't solve problems by using the same kind of thinking we used when we created them. So we have to think about new ways of doing things, and we have to look at our problems from a new perspective. And only when we do that will we find solutions. Thank you.